Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Boss Body Podcast. This is Sarah Haas. I'm so happy you're here, and I am so happy to welcome my special guest today, Laura DeCesaris. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I asked her several times beforehand how to pronounce it, and I apologize if I bungled it yet again. Anyway, she is a functional medicine practitioner, and that's why I'm so excited to have her on, because she specializes in helping busy women, which I know so many of you are, just like myself, who are dealing with stress, who are dealing with hormone imbalances, and having issues in their bodies and not exactly knowing where that's coming from or why that is. And she helps women navigate and get to the root of all these issues. So I know that what she is here to share with us today is going to be so, so helpful for so many of us. Laura, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so I'm so excited for this conversation, and I just can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah. Like I said, you work with busy women, high performing women who have careers and families. And, so many of us are balancing all of these things. We're juggling and we're stressed, and it affects our health. And I would just love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your own personal history, because I know that you've had some issues that you've dealt with that have sort of influenced how you work with other women. So if you could just give us a little background.
Yeah, I'd love to. Like so many other functional medicine practitioners, I kind of got into this field because of my own health struggles. And for those of you who may not know what functional medicine is, it really is a more preventative, proactive, holistic approach to your health. So by that, I mean, if you have a problem like a headache, instead of coming to a functional medicine practitioner and just getting a pill to fix it, we take a step back and say, okay, we want to help you feel better now, but also, where's the headache coming from? Is it coming from your gut? Is it coming from foods? Is it coming from hormones? Because let's set you up for success in the long run so that you don't end up in this cycle of headache pill, headache pill, headache pill. So it's a really beautiful approach that really considers the whole person, mind, body, and soul, to really forge people on this path towards what it means to experience optimal health. So I actually didn't grow up knowing what functional medicine was at all. Never heard the phrase. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. That was not available to where I was before the age of the internet and everything else. So my journey, how I got here, really started when I was in high school. When I was in high school, my mom, her identical twin, and my older sister all got diagnosed with thyroid cancer really close to each other. And so, of course, I got checked because genetics. Thankfully, I was in the clear, but it got me really interested in this health and families connection. So I thought I wanted to go study genetics and cancer genetics. So I went to Cornell University, fully assuming I would do that, got a job in a research lab immediately, and promptly found out I hated working in a research lab and needed to be around people more. So while I was at Cornell, I started exploring other options. I thought, okay, I guess regular medical school is a good fit for me. And then around the time I was 21, I started not feeling well. I was doing everything that I thought I was supposed to be healthy. I was on a treadmill in the gym every day for an hour after class. I was doing my best with a full course load. I knew I was stressed, but I thought I was eating healthy. It turns out those things I was doing were not healthy for me. I was 21, supposed to be in like the prime of your life, and I could barely make it through classes. I would sleep 12 hours a night and still wake up tired, and I was gaining weight no matter what I did. And I got diagnosed shortly afterwards with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid disease. So again, there was that thyroid piece popping up in my world. And I went to a doctor who said, you're going to have to just be on thyroid medicine forever, and couldn't really tell me why it happened. And I think I was a stubborn 21-year-old who was like, that's not a good enough answer. I want to know what's happening. So in my search for trying to figure out what was going on, my mom actually, who'd been into integrative alternative medicine before it was as cool as it is now, she insisted I go with her to see her chiropractor. And I was kind of like, why? My back doesn't hurt. Like, whatever, fine. So I go with her to see this chiropractor who also happened to be a functional medicine practitioner. And my experience with her changed my life. She told me that I had to look at things like my gut health and my stress and the foods I was eating because maybe they weren't right for me, and really just taught me that each person is very different. And especially when it comes to something like an autoimmune disease, we have to consider that each person is different. There is no one size fits all solution to help resolve those symptoms. So literally overnight, she just changed the way I looked at health. And I actually applied to chiropractic school literally the next week. And I was like, I'm doing what she's doing. This is awesome. This woman is 55. She loves her job. Absolutely. Went off to chiropractic school, was fortunate enough to find another functional medicine practitioner there who taught, who could be a mentor for me. I kind of knew I didn't really want to do just chiropractic pretty quickly. So I also got my master's in clinical nutrition degree while I was there. I started studying with the Institute for Functional Medicine and finished that certification once I graduated. And really the cool part for me about that whole process was as I was learning all of these different functional medicine tools, learning about gut health and hormone health and stress and cortisol, I was immediately applying it to me. I was my own test subject. And really, for me, it was able to put Hashimoto's in remission. I haven't had antibodies elevated again since I was 23, and I've been able to keep it that way. So if that gives hope to anyone out there who has Hashimoto's, there are things you can do, but it has to be your journey and you got to get really curious about it. So I immediately started working with other clients who had autoimmune issues. It was near and dear to my heart. I then did a second fellowship with the Academy for Anti-Aging Medicine and Functional Medicine. And then by the time I got to around 30 and entered that stage of I'm working all the time, I'm busy, I don't have quite as much time as I had right out of college to focus on things. I now have, adult relationships and working relationships and the new sort of stress. I decided just to switch gears a little bit in terms of who I worked with and decided to really start working with busy working women to educate them more about what do your hormones actually mean? What is your brain actually doing? What is your female body and your female physiology? How is that translating to how you show up every day? Because that was something that was then part of my journey. Okay, I healed myself from Hashimoto's with the help of all these amazing mentors, but now I just feel like I'm fighting my body a lot. I don't know. I didn't know why some days I could show up and feel amazing, and then other days everything I did felt like a battle. Going to the gym felt like a battle. Working with clients felt like a battle. And for me, it was really learning more about the female physiology, the female hormone rhythm, and those changes that made the difference and let me fine tune things further.
Well, I love that you're using your personal experience to drive where you go with your career because I've done the same. And I think that that really is so helpful because you can put yourself in the place of the clients that you work with. So you can have that compassion and you know exactly what they've been through and you know exactly how to fix it, which is amazing. And I'm so happy that functional medicine is getting to be more well known. Like you said, back then, nobody knew about functional medicine. And functional medicine is really getting to the root cause of why we're experiencing all these symptoms. And the traditional healthcare model is more what I call sick care. It's just putting a Band-Aid on the symptom. So you go in with the headache, you get a Tylenol or whatever it is. And that doesn't get to the root of why are you having these chronic headaches? That's just masking the symptoms. And I think with women's health, that happens a lot, especially like with hormones. You go to the OBGYN and things aren't, you're having whatever, pain, period pain, endometriosis, things like that. they don't really know what to do. So they just give you this birth control pill that's sort of a one size fits all band-aid. And meanwhile, whatever was really going on is something serious that really needed to be addressed. And I'm so happy that there are people like you out there who are changing this model and showing people that, you know what, there's a much better way to heal yourself from the root out so that you can be truly well. And also just that women are starting to learn more about their bodies. We aren't taught a lot about hormonal health, brain health, gut health, how stress affects all of our systems. And I think it's amazing that you were able to, at the age of 21, already tap into that. You know, a lot of us don't start figuring these things out until much later in life. And so I think that's amazing that you had the wherewithal to question what the doctor was telling you. And it just shows me that you're in the field that you were absolutely meant to be in, because that person, that chiropractor, the functional medicine practitioner was put in your path for a reason. And I'm so happy that you are here now doing what you're doing.
I so appreciate that. And it's true. And you have to remember, I went to school thinking I wanted to go into research. So I have like just a very analytical mind, and that's how I approached that whole process. If you don't love doing that, it can be a little more difficult to make those connections along the way. And, you know, I think with functional and conventional medicine, it's not always an either or, it's a both and. There's some things that conventional medicine is incredible for, right? Like infectious disease, trauma, like all of these things are so important. But that system is not set up for success when it comes to having the time to educate people about their bodies, getting into imbalances in our system that are not yet at the state of disease, you know, those early stage hormonal imbalances, things like that. So it's both and, right? Because I see sometimes the two get pitted against each other a lot on the internet, and I don't think that I think that's confusing for a lot of people too. It's just that they have different strengths and different things that you can use them for. And I imagine a world where we all work together in the best interest of the
Yes.
patient. And wouldn't that just be an incredible
Oh,
place to be instead of
absolutely.
arguments on the internet?
I agree 100%. I'm a cancer survivor, and traditional medicine, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery saved my life 100%. So I absolutely believe that we need both. We need both
Yeah.
because, like you said, traditional medicine is great at diagnosing, and they're great with treating trauma and cancer and, heart attacks and surgeries. They are so great at that. But where I feel like they fail is like what I mentioned before. It's getting to the root of the problem. And the big issue, one of the big issues, is they don't have time to stay with their patient long enough to do that. So can you talk just a little bit more about how all these systems work together and how you help women figure out what they need to do and where the problems are coming from? So I know you work with busy, career driven women who have a lot of stress, and that stress sort of sets off this chain reaction and affects everything. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I think the first thing that if you're listening, that I would love you to understand is we've all kind of grown up in this system that it disconnects us from our body when we look at our health, and it tries to segment our health into different sections. And we can kind of see that. You go to one doctor, for your skin, one doctor for your hormones, one doctor for this and that. But the reality is our body, it does not work separately in systems. Everything is talking to each other and influencing each other all the time. And you have to understand that step one is that we need to reconnect to our bodies and understand that connection. If you really want to get to root causes, if you really want to understand how things like stress influence the body, it's not a simple, linear A to B reaction. It's like big nets going out in every direction. So stress in particular, it's really interesting to me because if you ask a lot of people about stress, what they think about stress, people who are experiencing a lot of stress will often say things like, I'm so stressed, stress is going to kill me, this and that. And we actually have studies that show if you think that, it's actually more likely to happen. So before we even get into the actual hormone physiology, our perception of stress and our relationship with it already impacts how it's going to help us. Meaning, sometimes the best thing you can do, even if you're in a stressful season, is start having a conversation with your body, as silly as that might sound, that, yeah, I'm experiencing a lot of stress, but I promise we're safe and I'm going to get through this. And it's setting me up to learn something about, whatever area it's in. So I always like to start with that because that's something we all can do, is work on that mindset and that relationship with stress, because it is there, it is studied, it is powerful to know that you can influence whether it's going to have a positive or negative net reaction on your body. Then as we kind of move into the actual physiology piece of it, when we have stress, and for the sake of this conversation, I'm talking about ongoing chronic stress, not like, we get sick in the moment. That's what we call an acute stressor. It's in, it's out. We're very well equipped to deal with that as humans. It's the chronic ongoing stress, the things that we always have. So I think of financial strain, relationships, being in unhealthy relationships, putting so much on ourselves in terms of demand with work and kids, and being, you know, getting things to other people without taking time for rest and pouring into ourselves. That kind of stress is the one that can really have these negative impacts on the body as a whole. And it does that in a couple of different ways. First, it can kind of start impacting the communication from your brain to the rest of your body. And when we think about hormones, we don't often think about the brain, but it's actually the one commonality between every hormone system. Your brain has to make the communications to different organs to make hormones or to stop making them. And when stress impacts that, it doesn't matter what good things you're doing for yourself, what supplements you're taking for your thyroid or your estrogen levels. If the brain piece isn't communicating because of ongoing stress, it's just not going to work the way you want. We know that stress causes lots of inflammation in the body, which again hinders the brain from doing its job, and it can impact our gut health. So now we're not digesting food, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we're 40 years old and we can't eat a bunch of foods anymore, and we have no idea where that came from. And it came from these chain reactions from stress. You didn't develop a food allergy overnight. Your gut just started not being as healthy because of stress-induced inflammation and changes to your gut bacteria. So you can see now, if all of a sudden you wake up and you're having bloating and you're experiencing issues with food, and you take a food sensitivity test and you cut out some foods and you're like, okay, that kind of worked, but I don't really feel better. It's because there's this whole other section with the rest of your body, because everything is talking all of the time. So we have to start looking at our bodies and looking at our health as a whole complex system. It's like a whole company with all the moving parts and pieces. It's not just one section. They're all talking all of the time.
Yeah, and it's funny because we've known for a long time that people who have stressful jobs, stressful lives will have more heart disease, have heart attacks, have high blood pressure. But I think it's really, really important that you are putting it out there that it's not just affecting your heart. All these systems are connected, and stress affects your body's inflammation. And when you have inflammation, it's going to affect all of your systems. And I know I myself did not put it together that stress can affect your hormones, but it makes perfect sense because your brain is the control center. Your brain is what directs everything else in your body. And if you're stressed, I know when I'm stressed, I feel tired. I feel lethargic. My brain is foggy. It's not as quick. It's more sluggish. So that's a symptom that's telling you that stress is affecting your brain, but I never really put all that together. And so I think that's so great that you're, just sort of putting that in a way that we can understand. So what are some of the things that you can do? Like, what do you do with your clients to help get to those roots, to help figure out where is this starting from and how do I fix this?
So I mentioned earlier that functional medicine looks at, mind, body, and soul. So really it's the same approach. So if we have someone who's dealing with high stress, when we're trying to figure out, okay, how many systems is this impacting? How many of the symptoms that this person is coming to me with? Maybe they're having trouble with their menstrual cycle, they're tired, they're not sleeping, they're anxious. Instead of addressing each one differently, it's like peeling back layers of an onion. Like, where's the root? So what's happening with the brain? Meaning, is the brain inflamed? Is the brain stressed? What's happening with the body? What's the actual state of those systems? What's actually happening with their hormones, with their gut? And we use a lot of functional lab testing to give us an idea of that person's baseline. And then that soul piece. Who is this person? Are they living in a way that's aligned with how they want their experience on earth to be? I know that this is like not a conversation you might hear in your doctor's office, but if we're not focusing on like who we are as beings on this earth and feeling really good and experiencing the full spectrums of emotions and sharing that lived human experience, like what good is the rest of it? Like we're not robots that we just focus on the labs and the physiology. We also have to make sure, are we fulfilled as people, as human beings, especially when it comes to stress? I think that's one of the most important parts. A person who has healthy relationships with themselves and others, who has a community, who is pursuing things that they enjoy doing, they will have better health outcomes than a person who doesn't have those, even if they're dealing with the same set of physiological conditions. So that part is really important too. So we get a full picture of all of those. And then, like I said, we might do lab testing. What's going on with their hormones? What are their inflammation levels like? What's going on with their gut health? What about their adrenal function, which is these little glands that make cortisol and are closely tied to our stress response? Do they have a healthy stress response from a biochemistry standpoint? And based on what we see, we can figure out, okay, how do we fix the here and now, the imbalances that you're experiencing so that you feel better in terms of your symptoms? And then step back, zoom out. How do we make sure that you're set up for success long term by eating in a way that works for your body, makes you feel good, by making sure you have supportive relationships, that you're doing personal growth work to work on your relationship with yourself? Um, all of those are pieces of the puzzle. It's not just a diet and supplements. Those are actually a very small piece. It's getting back to the things we need just as human beings: community, sunlight, getting outside, away from the screen sometimes.
Yeah, because you're hitting it from all the different angles, because you can't just treat one side without treating the other, because like you said, you need to do those labs. You need to see where this is manifesting in your body. Is it your adrenals? Is it your hormones? Is it your gut health? So that you can medically treat those areas. But in tandem, you also have to look at your life as a whole, your emotions, your spirituality, your relationships, your support system, your job, your stress levels, all of that, because that's going to continue to affect whatever medical issues that you have going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a very holistic model, which absolutely is what we all need, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that piece, the taking the time to look internally, right? And this metaphorical mirror where we're like, how am I experiencing life? Am I truly happy? What makes me happy? Am I supported? How do I acknowledge my emotions? Like, that's the hard stuff. Anyone can follow a diet and supplements at the end of the day. And the reason that people struggle with that, it's this other side of things, right? The internal narrative, all of that. So it's the most difficult part for most of us. I know that was definitely the most difficult in my journey, but I think it's also the most important if we really want that sense of alignment in life. When I think most women who say they want work-life balance, I actually don't think they want balance. I think that's not quite really what they want. They want a sense of ease and alignment in their life where it doesn't feel like they're constantly fighting these two things or trying to counterbalance two things. It just feels a little easier.
Yeah, and like you said, that's the hard part. That's really the hard part, is diving in and, figuring yourself out, figuring out, what's making you tick, what's going to make you happy, what isn't making you happy. And then once you figure it out, making those changes. So I think it's awesome that you, as a doctor, are helping people navigate that part of it as well as the medical side. So I know that you have a practice that you share with your clients to sort of help them deal with stress, sort of a beginner action step. And I would love for you to share that, because I know a lot of us need help in that area. We're told reduce your stress. But what does that mean? Well, I have kids. They're stressful. What am I supposed to do with that? I have a job. I have to go there. I have relationships. I have, family stress, whatever it is. So you can't just drop your life. There's, things you can't do anything about that cause stress. And I'd love for you to share what we can actually do to start bringing those stress levels down so that we create that balance, that ease, and that mental and physical health.
Absolutely. My favorite exercise that I take people through, and I do it myself once a month because for me, it just really helps me. It helps me keep things in perspective and really connect to what's happening in my life and what my needs are. So we call it the stress bucket exercise. Maybe someone else can help me come up with a better name than that. But if you're listening, pause this, go grab a piece of paper. You can do this in real time. And really what it is you just get a blank sheet of paper, or you can use, the notes app in your phone if you want, but there's something powerful, I think, about taking pen to paper. And you're just going to list everything that right now feels really stressful and heavy for you. Nothing is too big, nothing is too small. It can be, maybe an aging parent or a family member that's ill. Maybe it's not having time for yourself. It's your diet. It's something else. Anything that is causing you stress, get it all out. Take a couple of minutes and just brain dump every stressor in your life. When you're finished, then I want you to take a step back and you're going to reread the list and you're going to cross out anything that is out of your control. And by that, I mean, if you have a family member who's ill, if you have a neighbor who lives down the street who does something really annoying, these are things that you can do nothing about, as hard as that is. You cannot do anything about them. It's something that we just have to experience. But there are a lot of things that we do have control over. And after you go through and you cross out the things that you can't control, now you have a list of things that you can influence and start to tackle. So when people say like, okay, I have to reduce my stress, I don't know how. Step one is identifying what are the things that I can actually move the needle on that are causing me stress, that I am finding stressful. Maybe that is figuring out your diet and what to eat. Maybe that's taking the time to learn more about it, to work with a nutritionist or a dietitian, to delegate that and have someone guide you through it if it's causing you a lot of stress and inner turmoil. If it's not having time for yourself, maybe that is sitting down your family, your kids, and having a conversation of, hey, like, mama needs 30 minutes a day for me. This is how it's going to be. And like, that is so difficult for us as women, as mothers, like setting those little boundaries, so difficult because we always tend to put ourselves on that back burner and think of us last. But I promise if you start to do that, you're going to be able to show up better because you'd carved that time for yourself. And you're also setting in this incredible example for your kids of what self-care really looks like. Okay, self-care is having the hard conversations, setting aside time for me to pour into myself so that I show up as my best and my healthiest. And they might not understand at first, but I think kids are more knowledgeable than we give them credit for sometimes. Like, they'll watch and they'll learn. Those are some big ones I see for busy moms, and you kind of apply that with anything. Maybe it's having a difficult conversation with someone at work. Like, It's not always easy to address the stressors, but you do know after doing this exercise, what are the things that I actually can take action on versus the ones that might still feel stressful and heavy, but there's nothing I can do about that. So if I try and just fix that situation, I'm trying to fix someone else's stuff that really is not going to help me at all. But let me help clean up my bucket, because then the stress I feel towards the things out of control, my bucket's not as full now. So I can weather those a little better. I can handle that a little bit better.
I like that because I am a real, put it in black and white, put the pen to paper. I love making lists. I love I call it a brain dump. You call it
Yeah,
a stress bucket. Get it out of my head and put it out on the paper, because if it's in my head, it's just going to keep circling and swirling and I can't land on anything. And it creates that constant anxiety. And so I really love that your idea is just brainstorm, just dump it all, put it all on paper, and then start to organize it. That gives, I like organization. I like structure. And I think it's helpful for anyone because you have it in front of you and then cross off those things that you can't do anything about. Those are going to be there. There's nothing you can do. And then which things do you have some control over? And, like you said, maybe it's a difficult conversation that you're avoiding. I think that can be kind of motivating and sort of hold you accountable, like, okay, I really need to deal with this. Once you see it on your paper right in front of you and realize how much mental energy you're spending dealing with that and dreading it and avoiding it and pushing it away, and it keeps coming up and it keeps swirling in your head. And I always feel better when I know I have some direction, when I know I have some actions I can take. I mean, my stress level is high when I'm procrastinating and when I have that overwhelm, and then it comes down immediately once I just start taking some action.
absolutely. And the underlying physiology of that conversation, if you're listening to this and you're like, how is this related to my health? Well, you know, the more we don't address things that stress us out, the less safe our body feels. And if we want balanced, healthy hormones, if we want all of that, the body has to feel safe. Like I think it's really important to understand that our brains are not wired to be like happy and carefree. Our brains as like human beings are wired to be analyzing, looking for danger, to be in fear. So we have to do some work to create that space to feel carefree, to not feel stress, because otherwise that's what your brain is automatically going to do. But if you can get ahead of it by being present, by starting building these connections and this self-awareness, that's how your body, your brain learns, oh, okay, this is all right. Like there's things going on, but we're safe. We got it. We can handle it. Let's send out the right happy brain chemicals to keep everything in balanced versus being in this perpetual state of fight or flight, fleeing from danger that we're really wired to live in as organisms.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you've brought up some really, really important points. And I say all the time, every emotion you have, every feeling you have creates a physiological response in your body. We know it in a lot of cases, like what I said before. If you have high stress, you end up with heart disease and heart attacks. But we tend to forget that it can cause all kinds of other reactions. And so treating that stress really starts counteracting that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight feeling, because and stress can be toxic, not the short-term stress, not the, whatever, the quick thing that you deal with and move on from. The long-term, the chronic
Yeah,
stressors create that chronic inflammation, and it eventually manifests into diseases, disorders, autoimmune, whatever that may be. So thank you. I appreciate this conversation and everything that you have brought to the forefront and the work that you're doing for women and for everyone. I just want to applaud you and thank you so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I love having these conversations. I could literally talk about it all day.
I know I could too. All right. Thank you guys all so much for being here and for listening. I will see you next time.